When it comes to new updates, Gaijin surely has a flair for the dramatic. If you think that when they drop dev servers with incomplete content as to what goes on live, it's merely just because it isn't ready, you'd be mostly right. But this is also Gaijin's way of hiding surprises. Today, I'll take you through some of the wildest surprises Gaijin has pulled since the update New E.R.A. back in 2017. These surprises became known through many ways: surprise devlogs, a tiny glimpse of it in a test server stream, data mining, or just a very dodgy leak that somehow turned out to be true. Uh, So why would I arbitrarily start from New E.R.A.? New E.R.A., in my opinion, was Gaijin's biggest surprise of that year and would help shape War Thunder to what it has become today. For New E.R.A., Gaijin wore their heart on their sleeve and presented New E.R.A. at Gamescom, flying out Fly Daily to present the new vehicles. Interestingly, in the same stream, they also denied that air-to-air missiles and supersonic jets were coming to War Thunder, something we will note for later. New E.R.A. was more or less straightforward. Released on the 21st of September 2017, 5 months after the legendary Modern Tanks April Fool's event, Gaijin revealed the arrival of Rank 6 ground forces. They defined Rank 6 ground forces then as tanks with composite armor in E.R.A., with the US being represented by the MBT-70 and the M60A1 Rice Passive, Germany with the KPZ-70, USSR with the T-64A, and Britain with the Chieftain Mark 10. While there are interesting additions such as the BMP-1 and the M50 Antos, it was very clear that New E.R.A. had no hidden surprises, and Gaijin was very clear that the focus was Tier 6 ground forces. Back then, people wildly speculated the implications of the vehicles added, but no one would ever anticipate what was in store for updates to come. 1.73 was the start of Gaijin adding small surprises to every update. 1.73's main focus was the implementation of the French air tree, hence the name Vive la France. However, a small addition in the form of the P40 Leoncello and the M26 Pershing Ariete surprised the players by being the first Italian tanks added to the game. While the full Italian ground forces tree wouldn't come for a while, these two vehicles were confirmation that this was the direction Gaijin was looking to head towards, and Italian players were very much welcome with this direction. 1.75 seemed like an inconspicuous update from the get-go as it was wholly focused on padding out the recently added air tree and implementing the ground forces tree. However, now that we have the benefit of hindsight, the addition of the F-86 F-40 for Japan was something to look out when back then it just seemed like a redundancy for the Japanese tree. But as with all Christmas updates bar one particular update we shall gloss over later, La Resistance was fairly innocuous. I really can't say tiny as it did implement an entire tree. However, Gaijin was back with a vengeance with the next update. The first devlog for 1.77 was the Leopard 2K. It was the first ever vehicle with a Rheinmetall 120mm gun ever implemented in-game, and people believed that Germany was being coddled again with an immediate follow-up to the KPZ-70. However, the next tank devlog revealed a worthy adversary, the Challenger Mark II. This generated some massive hype that was sure to be met in the next devlog around the corner. Enter the M1 Abrams. The legendary main battle tank of the United States finally enters War Thunder as an actual playable vehicle. I remember the gigantic hype around it, grinding the MBT-70 and the Abrams with the M60, M48, and M103 since I couldn't buy them at GOT. The USSR received a follow-up to the T-64A as well, in the form of the T-64B. However, the sluggish T-64B couldn't keep up with the quick and powerful Abrams and Leopard 2K, and this was when the maximum battle ratings were 9.0. The Abrams sat at 9.0 while the 2K sat at 8.7. Facing a Leopard 2K at 7.7 was nothing but a nightmare, which meant it was easily pushed to 9.0. Arguably, the M1 Abrams was the one vehicle that opened up two new battle ratings in order to accommodate it. By the next update, the Abrams was at 9.7 along with the Challenger Mark II, T-64B, and the Leopard 2K went up a battle rating. On a different path, however, Gaijin also added the earliest ships for naval testing in this update. However, testing itself wouldn't begin in the next update. For 1.79, Gaijin already gave Japanese players a very early heads up with the Type 90, with them tweeting about getting documents from the Japanese military in cooperation with DMM. It's been only one thing. Gaijin was ever eager to push the boundaries of Tier 6, and players were not disappointed. If you were anything but an USSR main, the Leopard 2A4 came, a premium XM1 Chrysler, and General Motors to celebrate the release of War Thunder on Xbox. France also received their first 120mm MBT, the AMX-40. USSR, however, felt lacking. They received an upgrade not as a new tank, but merely the addition of Contact 1 explosive reactive armor on the T-64B, slowing down an already sluggish tank that has to compete with faster tanks like the Type 90. Naval also received a surprise in the form of the Emden and the Trenton, the first ever light cruisers in War Thunder, cementing a trend that Gaijin would follow to this very day. 1.81 started off with a bang. The devlogs for helicopters arrived much to everyone's surprise. An entirely new vehicle type coming from left field with no indication other than the April Fool's event that it was being worked on. While the official name the Valkyries was a bit cheeky, there was nothing cheeky about helicopters then and helicopters now. While Russia finally got a new MBT with a T-80B which should keep up as well with its turbine engine, Gaijin also blew the dam wide open by introducing then Tier 5 bundles of the Leopard A1 L44 and T55A1 to match the XM1 added in the previous update. Because we were gifted with the benefit of hindsight, we knew that these premiums only meant one thing, which Gaijin would give us 3 updates later. These vehicles would eventually be moved to Tier 6 after the said update drop. If this reminds you of something we have in the current update, you're not imagining things. 1.83 through and through was nothing but the release of naval forces for War Thunder. This included the newly implemented Royal Navy tree and newer ships for older trees, while naval forces was given its much needed attention from Gaijin, which felt like a one-time thing. They also implemented a helicopter tree for the Germans with the BO-105ZB2 as a premium helicopter. While as middling as this update was when it came to aircraft, there was nothing middling about what came next. 1.85 began with a slow start. Italian ground vehicles seemed to be the focus of the update, along with a few new vehicle types and top-end vehicles for each nation, such as the Bradley, T-72, and the Challenger Mark III. However, when the update name was revealed, it became clear what was coming for War Thunder. When people found out the name was Supersonic, accompanied with the F-100D and MiG-19 PT devlogs, players knew Gaijin had just taken the leap to what they said a year earlier was impossible. After-burning supersonic jets, Rank 6 aviation had been introduced, and E.R.A in War Thunder had just entered a new meta. For what Supersonic gave, the next update would match even greater. The first surprise of 1.87 was its devlog. The Challenger 2 devlog confirmed the Tier 7 vehicles were indeed coming, and it would be represented by the aforementioned Challenger 2. However, when the test server stream started, it was clear what Gaijin had done. Everyone saw the Mitsubishi T2, and they knew War Thunder aircraft as they known it had ceased to exist. This was the most modern-looking machine that Gaijin has implemented. The F-100D and MiG-19 PT received their missiles as well, but non-supersonic jets with missiles also made their debut with the CL-13B Mark VI, the F-86 F-4T for Japan added last year, the F-9F8, and the Seahawk FGA-6 to name a few. Following up the hype with the release of the F-86 F-40 JSDF Premium Pack, you'd be forgiven if you forgot that this was the same update French helicopters were implemented, or that this was the same update that the M1 Abrams and Radar SPAA were also added. Hell, the T2 took up so much of our attention that Gaijin didn't bother telling anyone that they also added the Leopard 2A5 for Germany, which became the bane of tank players' existence for at least 3 updates. Ladies and gentlemen, Welcome to 1.87 Locked On. The first devlog for 1.89 was an announcement of the closed beta bundles for the Japanese Navy, the Kiyoshima and the PGO-2. For what seemed like a brief moment, we believed that Gaijin gave much needed care for Naval. But unfortunately, we were wrong. This update supplemented more radar SPAA in the form of the Bradley ADAT, the Flak Panzer I Roland, Stormer HVM, and the Roland 1 for France. This also included the addition of the production Ariete and Leclerc, accompanied by Tier 6 premium stack OF40 MTCA and AMX30 Super. What caught my eye, however, and convinced me to purchase the pack was the AH-1S Kisarazu. This particular AH-1S had always caught my eye. Not only was it because it was extremely unique, Gaijin went the extra step and modeled the female pilots for that helicopter only. The H-1S Kisarazu remains to be my favorite helicopter in the game despite its obvious drawbacks in the current meta. If there's one thing anyone would remember from 1.91 other than the content itself, it was how word got out. The shooting range trip had surfaced online which revealed the arrival of China as a playable nation, but most importantly that the top Chinese vehicle was a Chengdu J7 II. This profoundly shocked me and some of my friends watching because we all knew what the J7 was. Essentially a Chinese-built MiG-21 copy, the addition of the J7 II only meant that the USSR was receiving its MiG-21. And it did. To much fanfare, the MiG-21 F-13's devlog was revealed. But on that day, Gaijin wasn't done. They also released a devlog for arguably the beginning of the next massive leap in aviation, the F-4C Phantom II. In 3 updates, Gaijin left from Mach 1 to Mach 2. Their arrival meant that Gaijin had finally decided to expand Rank 6 aviation to include Mach 2 jets. Shark Attack was probably the least favorite update of anyone that year, unless you bought into the hype. The first ever devlog was a KA-50 with Vickr ATGMs. See, the Vickr ATGMs had a lot of things going for it. 10-kilometer range that outranged gun SPAA in certain SAMs. In helicopter battles, the Vickr also benefited from proximity detonation to dispatch air targets accurately. But the real surprise was the addition of another Abrams to the US tree. The M1A2 Abrams was implemented this update and was essentially the same as the M1A1 in terms of firepower. With improved armor and commander thermals gave it an edge. Swedish premium aircraft were also added, heralding the arrival of the Swedish tree in the next update. While Gaijin tried their best to focus on the Swedish aircraft tree and Northern Wind, they also made a conscious choice to implement the MiG-21 MF and the MiG-21 SMT that update, introducing R-60s into air battles for the first time. But as a temporary nerf, while the other nations waited for their comparable aircraft, the R-60s were hard nerfed to only have 18 Gs of maximum overload as opposed to the 30 Gs it currently has. The Swedish premium vehicle bundles were also introduced, as well as the Prince Eugen bundle along with the Admiral Graf. Naval was inching ever closer to the state it is now, for better or for worse. Gaijin closed 2019 with an expansion of Tier 6 aviation looming closer to where we would be today. Everyone knew what was coming in Viking Fury. It focused on Swedish tanks, started by the addition of the premium vehicles added in the preceding update. Gaijin also decided to give Sweden a premium Tier 6 bundle in the form of the CV90-105 TML. However, accompanying this update was the F4E Phantom II, along with its sister F4EJ in the Japanese tree. Doing away with the gun pod on the belly, it replaced its IRST pod on the nose with the M61 20mm rotary cannon. The British received some love in the form of the English Electric Lightning F6. Apaches were also added, supplementing the American and British trees. However, the KA-52 was also added, this time removing the one lacking the KA-50 had, thermal optics. 1.99, despite the naming convention, wasn't the last 1.xx update for War Thunder. And this update is special because it was split into two parts. The first half was called Starfighters and focused on, yup, you guessed it, a mass implementation of F-104 variants into their respective trees. Along with this, the Germans acquired another Tier 5 premium jet, the G91R4, France their Mirage 3, as well as the J-35Ds RB-24Js. China received a new premium tank to replace the controversial T-62 number 545. Britain received a new top-tier tank in the form of the Challenger 2-2F, and Japan received its first missile SPAA, the Type 93. A month later, Regia Marina was introduced, bearing the update number 1.99.1.26. Three low-tier premiums were introduced, and the namesake Regia Marina went out of CBT, perhaps the quickest CBT period for any naval tree. Raining Fire was the last 1.xx update for War Thunder. Officially designated as Update 1.101, it introduced a slew of ground attackers for various nations such as the Q-5, the Jaguars, and the Su-7s. The final variants of the T-72 were added, the 1989 and the T-72B3, along with the long-awaited P-47 Razorbacks, along with the equivalent premiums of other trees. However, the biggest surprise to come from this update was the addition of semi-active radar-holding missiles, Sparrows, R3S, and R530 missiles. This increased the total missile capacity of the Phantoms to 8 missiles, making the F-4E the most effective aircraft and top tier at that point in time, especially when the MiG-21s were forced to stay on deck while Phantoms enjoyed altitude superiority. War Thunder would remain quiet for a few months before dropping something huge right after their anniversary. It was clear that Gaijin had new power in the making for a very long time. On the first week, they released a trailer that showcased massive hype. T-90, Leopard 2A6, battleships, new carriers, new hangars, new particle effects, and the SK-60B. But that was just the tip of the massive iceberg that also unveiled itself in a few weeks. The first dev stream showed what Gaijin has been hiding all this time. Vertical takeoff and landing aircraft. Harriers had finally arrived along with the Yak-38s. The Harrier GR1, the AV-8A, and the Yak-38 came as premiums, with the AV-8C, Yak-38M, and Harrier GR3 as regular tree additions. The arrival of the long-awaited Mitsubishi F1, M1128 Striker, and the Germans receiving the Flarakrad, with Gaijin topping off with the STRV-122 PLSS and the Leclerc S2. New power was certainly an unforgettable update for anyone playing War Thunder. Whether you take that positively or negatively, it is undeniable. Volumetric shells were also introduced, much to some players' chagrin. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to War Thunder 2.0. We've captured most of the strategic zone. So how do you follow up such a massive update? The answer is, you don't. Because Gaijin tried to churn out 5 updates a year, Hot Tracks was more or less just fulfillment of that objective. The notable additions were the ZTZ-99, the first Tier 7 vehicle for China, the Italian helicopter tree, and the A-7D. The A-7D proved to be a very menacing addition to the US air tree, carrying both the AIM-9Js of the F-4E and two 30mm gun pods on top of an integrated 20mm Gatling gun. While the A-7D's ground attack capabilities would be greatly enhanced later, it became a bane of 9.7 aircraft because of its air spawn and armament. Volumetric tracks were taking a back seat in this update partly because they wouldn't be fully implemented until the next update. Now we're here today. You know what's in Equistrike, South Africa, the start of Swing Wings, and the Mavericks. And we're a month removed from the next update. What do you think Gaijin has up their sleeve for the next update? What are you expecting in the coming months? Thanks for tuning in, and remember, Gaijin please.